So here we go. We are still language detectives. So we started with the theme of being language detectives, and we are looking for our clues, the key language uses, narrate, inform, explain, and argue. That is our goal for this year. So we can use these key language uses to prioritize and organize the integration of language and content. I'm really excited about what this means for us. And I think you all have so much going on that taking the time this year to work through this together might be useful because I should have asked for this. How many of you have already read through this 400-page document, our new framework? Anybody? Okay, so that is what we're going to kind of do is look at some highlights and go from there together. So we have our mission today. We're going to go kind of simply through what we're doing. So I'm going to, for newcomers, we have a lot of new teachers. I'm going to kind of review what our personalized pathways for ESL/PD is, and then look at common and unique linguistic and organizational features of these key language uses. We're going to focus in on narrate. And then you'll get to meet with your sleuth group, which is your breakout groups for this year. And then we'll come back together, go through the playlist report, and I'll make sure you get your kick up attendance. That's the one link I didn't open. I'll get that ready for us. So just in case you want it, here is the link you will need at some point in time by the end of the meeting, by the end of the quarter, really by the end of the quarter, you'll need that link. And it's also on the Canvas page in order to fill out your self-report. We'll come back around that to later. Feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. So this document, our new WIDA 2020 standards framework, is very big and it can be very confusing. It kind of repeats over and over again. And so we have two ways in. One way is these personalized pathways, which we're doing right now, and the other is model lessons that I'm doing separately and as an option for you. And they're also recorded and those resources are available to you optionally. So another thing I did, if you're really interested in all of this, is to connect what we're doing this year to your PDP goal. And so if you're interested, I did create a model PDP. Ken, I didn't send the PDF file. I'll get there in just a second, okay? So if I created models and a few teachers shared back some models. So if you have not done your PDP goal yet and you're interested in that language, then there it is. And if you have done your PDP goal and it's connected to key language uses and you want to share that, then I can add it back to that document just so that we have sort of a repository of some of the ways that we're working on this together and language that principals have accepted for PDP goals. All that said, the goal I'm kind of setting for us is that by the end of this year, ESL teachers are going to be familiar with these key language uses. So we're really working right now on being able to distinguish and recognize, narrate, inform, explain, and argue when we see them within those grade level standards. And similarly, we have a language objective, which is not because you are language learners, some of us are, but not because you're not already level 6 proficient with English language. It's because I like to model this SIOP strategy of having a content and a language objective. So for our language objective, ESL teachers will be able to eventually, at least by the end of this school year, support our classroom and content colleagues as they look for the academic language in the content standards they're already teaching. So you can see how these are very connected. One is for us just to be able to understand and start breaking apart. That's the learning we're doing now. But eventually, I hope this turns into talking points for all of us as we step into a role of language specialists in our schools. Any questions about those objectives? All right, am I going too fast for anybody? Let me know. Okay. So you might want to have a chance to go ahead and get into our Canvas page. So there's a bit.ly, and I'm going to send the direct link for Canvas if anybody wants to grab that. Let me show you. I need to do this. Here we go. Okay, so can you still see my screen and see the Canvas page? Okay, great. So a couple of things you might want to pay attention to, but right now, definitely personalized pathways. Some other things I've been referring to a lot recently, adapt and modifies, where those new UPOs are that we created over the summer for you. So make sure you take a look at that. Take a look at important links. That's where the ECATS information is. And I keep adding back to those slides that say ECATS. So all of that is in one place and it's housed here under important links. Professional development is where you can find resources from the Narrate lesson that I did earlier. And I've got quite a few links and resources for you there. So here for personalized pathways, when you go in, you should be able to see our slide deck here. At the end of the slide deck is a slide that has all of the links I'm using today. So if you lose a link from the chat, they're all there. I've gone through and caught them. So they should all be there. Flor, good. I'm so glad that your principal accepted that language for the PDP goals. I think that's really good. Okay, let me get back. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to run down what personalized pathways are for any of our new teachers and anybody else who just could use the refresher. So if you are an old hat with this and this is your third year doing personalized pathways and you feel pretty good, feel free to take a breather. But this year we are centering our 4 pathways around the WIDA big ideas: equity, integration, a functional approach, and collaboration. So I'm not really doing anything specific for equity or integration. I'm not doing specific things for these because I'm going to stick with these key language uses in the direct instruction part that I do. However, what you can do in your groups when you get into the breakout groups is talk about how your big overwhelming theme is represented in anything that we're doing together today or this quarter or new learning that you're bringing in to share with your small group. So it's a lens for you to use. Additionally, should your group decide that you want to do a WIDA e-learning course together, I can direct you to certain e-learning courses that would connect very specifically with your topic. Now that's a group issue. Also, you can do it individually. So you just let me know and I'll start getting you connected to those WIDA e-learning courses. Are there any questions about that so far? So we have 4 pathways and we follow the playlist process. So, there's the foundational learning. We're all going to focus on WIDA 2020. And then we go through how do we reflect on our learning? And right now that this is the most important thing is being here so you can participate in the discussions. That's your reflective practice. But there are other ways to do that. And they're listed here in this worksheet. And they're also listed on Canvas if you want to go ahead and get there. Yes, Rebecca, that's it. Thank you so much for giving that to Ken. Then we move into asset creation. And, this, to me, this year should go right along with the UPOs. If you teach a lesson or you create a resource or a graphic organizer or anything, a slide deck that goes along with some of the UPOs that we created, the model units that we created, then share that back with us so that together we're in charge of building a more robust curriculum for our colleagues. So to me, if you're going to create anything, let's just make it really connected, really tight. Now, if there's something else you have that you want to create and it's not connected, you can still share that back. And then again, distribution is bringing it back to everybody else. So asset creation could just be you're doing it for your classroom, but that distribution is where it comes back to all the rest of us. And so we all get to see it. And so there are several ways to do that. Again, some of them are listed here on this sheet. This is the first page on the Canvas Personalized Pathways module. And then each of those pieces have its own page in Canvas for Personalized Pathways. All right, so that's a quick rundown on what we're doing. It's very simply because I think that some teachers this year are completely overwhelmed. And so to simplify, bottom line is let's learn a little bit of WIDA 2020 together this year. Let's do it during these 4 required meetings. So if all you can do is the 6 hours over this whole year, an hour and a half once each quarter, then that's fine. And your opportunity to do more learning with that self-report is optional. If you're an ESL teacher, I had somebody write me today saying, how am I supposed to do personalized learning and letters training? Look, letters training is going to give you the CEUs you need. Then you don't need this extra stuff. So this self-report, the self-paced part of Personalized Pathways is really so you can choose your own adventure here about how you want to earn CEUs, and I can make sure that I'm giving them to you for what you're doing. Letters is separate, and that's great. That means you don't need to do anything separate with me. Okay, so does that help explain anything? Are there any questions? Take a minute to add to the chat or unmute, clarify. I'm still here. My internet didn't go bad. I'm just waiting. This is wait time, think time. Okay. All right. If there are any questions, of course, you can contact me individually. I'll be happy to hear your individual questions. All right. So let's go ahead and move into the content learning for today. These next few slides might be hard to see. So I invite you to go ahead and get access, pull up however you need to the WIDA 2020 standards framework. We're going to start somewhere around page 220. Hang on. Here it is. On the PDF, it's page 222 is where we're going to start. And we go to page 224, which is the PDF page 226. So somewhere around page 220, if you're in the book, or 222, if you're on the PDF. All right, who needs more time to get there? Okay, I'm going to head on. Thank you, Hernan, for the thumbs up. Just need one person to let me know we're moving on, and I'll move on, because somebody else would have had to say wait if they needed me to wait. All right, so we're going to take a look at kind of two pieces here. I'm assuming that you've had a chance to look at some of the early pages that talk about key language uses. So I'm going to the back of the book where it kind of unravels it a little bit more. And so right now we're going to see that there are both common and unique linguistic and organizational features of the key language uses. So the first bit we're going to look at is a common feature, and there are three: noun groups, nominalization, and given new information, also called zigzag. And those are shared by all of the key language uses. So even though narrate is our focus, what we're going to know is that we can see noun groups across those four key language uses: narrate, inform, explain, and argue. So let's take a look at what we mean by noun groups. So if we pay attention to these three key language use or common features of these key language uses, we can start to explicitly teach them to our multilingual learners. This can help our learners use these features across the various key language uses to make the features portable, help our students increase their own independence because they can recognize what they're reading in academic texts. They can do it on their own, and it won't matter what genre they're in. So that's part of the reason why WIDA is focusing on these as linguistic features. So noun groups can be challenging because it has to do with the density of information that's packed all in together in these noun groups. And it can all be connected with one verb, like is. All of these words and kind of be connected with this one verb. So WIDA is calling a noun group something that we probably have called other things, like dependent clauses or independent clauses or noun clauses. And WIDA is just calling it noun groups and giving us a way to teach it that really simplifies it. So the basic definition is it's a group of words that relate to one noun. And it can have words that go before it or words that go after it. But since all those words relate to the same noun, they're going to function with that same verb. It's a very simple explanation. And all these words that work together are going to be adding information about the noun. So first of all, I'm really curious because when David and I talked about this, he was maybe not so happy with this definition. He wanted the standard grammatical definitions, and let's talk about clauses and phrases. So how do you feel about this? do you think that this makes it a more simplified and streamlined way to teach our English learners how to identify the words that work together in a sentence? Or does this get more confusing because it's not the grammar we were taught?
I think we have to remember we were taught grammar, and they don't really teach a lot of grammar or writing anymore. I mean, it's a reality. I mean, most kids, you kind of have to remind them what a noun is. So I think simplifying this is actually great, because all those technical terms aren't as important as what is the information you need to learn. Like, do you really need to know if it's a clause or an independent? I mean, I get that on a higher level, but what I've seen in my experience is we are not teaching writing. I mean, we need to teach capitalize a sentence, put a period at the end. So I think this is actually a great idea, personally.
Thanks, Christine. Anybody
That's
else?
my input.
I appreciate that. Anybody else? Big ideas?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, I wanted to say that it is a great idea that it's something simple, not only for us, but for students as well, that we can actually tell them this is a noun group. Because like when sometimes we tell them this is a subordinated conjunction or something like that, the students end up learning what a coordinated conjunction is and how to use it, but they will not remember that that is a coordinated conjunction. So what we really need is for them to learn how to put things together and make sentences correctly and all that, and not really to know all that kind of those definitions and things like that. So noun group, I agree. It's a good idea.
Thanks.
And I wanted to add that for reading, if I understand this right, then it's a helpful way to see which things go together. And really the beauty of sentence diagramming is that it gives you a visual image of which words go with which other words. But this is kind of the same idea. We know that this whole string of words somehow goes together. So then we can think about that as one piece. So I like that too.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Go ahead, Michael.
I was just thinking, I was trying to teach about multisyllabic words, and so doing prefixes and suffixes, and just like pulling those out. And so this is like a similar thing where you're looking at before and after, you're looking near like the noun and with expanded meanings, and so you just look before, like in a sentence level instead of, at a word level, looking before and after the key noun. For me,
very nice expansion.
Makes sense to me. I like that.
Very nice. So like a root word with pre-words and post-words or suff words. Yeah. I like that. That's very nice. Thank you. Yes, and sentence diagramming, as Elizabeth said, and Laurie is commenting, like I loved sentence diagramming. I loved grammar. I was very good at grammar, and that has rarely helped me teach English, because when I get strung up in like, here's the grammar, even here's the morphologies, like I lose my students. Like that's not what they need. And the thing is when they have this complete reaching academic grasp of English language, grammar is still there for them. All the names, all the clauses, we're not taking anything away. I see this as scaffolding very specifically because we're giving them a leg up, and eventually they can move on from here to what else they need. So I'm not suggesting that we're dumbing anything down. I don't think WIDA is suggesting that. Although I will say I get to attend the WIDA conference coming up, and I'm really excited about that. And this is one of the questions I have is, what are we doing with this noun groups instead of, what we're used to calling it? But this is my current interpretation. So I'm open to learning more from WIDA. And my current interpretation is we're simplifying the way in so that we can build success right now. And that's not taking anything away from the grammatical understanding and awareness and labeling that they can do as they move into their reaching English abilities.
When I suggested the sentence diagramming, I was kind of joking. What would make sense, because sentence diagramming hooks everything where it belongs, whether it's before or whether it's after, where the chunks are, because it's not as easily definable when things all move around, So it does give dedicated streamlining to here are the basics, here are more specifics, and so these are the the whatever phrase, or these are the whatever phrase, the predicate, or any of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So there is sense to it, but I can't see that it would happen.
You still think this is going to be difficult for learners to grasp?
I think sentence diagramming is expecting too much, but I think in certain ways it would be helpful if there were a normative pattern of that, where they could say, oh, okay, now I see why this goes with the subject and not the verb, the predicate, or because there's just not a lot of predictability in some of our patterns.
Sure.
And, so anyway.
Sure. Yeah. So I see this, I diagram sentences and I labeled sentences. I don't know if you remember having to put like little letters above the words, whether it's an adjective or a noun or whatever. So I did both. And I could see this really as like, let's just highlight the noun and circle all the words that work with it. Like just a very simple way in to look at, especially a really juicy, complicated sentence when they get really layered and intricate, to really take that time to notice how all of these things work with this one noun, and how, at different levels, it can get more complicated, more intricate. But I bet that there's a way to turn this into annotations. I'm really curious to see what you come up with as you go through the year. And so as you pay attention in texts to where you can find noun groups, let me know what you then see about how you can teach them to your learners. As we pay attention. Oh yeah, go ahead, Hernan.
Real quickly, I just wanted to share that this week I worked with context clues with my fourth graders, and that's exactly what I did. So we spotted the word that we were looking for, and then we circle words that were related to that word.
So already on track. And I'm adding to the chat one more thing for student writing, where I think this can go from reading to writing, is a strategy from the Writing Revolution, which is the book some of you have chosen, and it's called Kernel Sentences and Expansions. I should have prepared this. I did not. I do have a link to share that just shows what that is. So somebody remind me and I'll make sure it gets.
An example, Tamara?
Yes, do it.
Okay, I've been working on and with my just turned 3-year-old. And so I asked her the other day, she was getting a treat, and I said, would you like a donut or would you like a milkshake? And she said, I want a donut and a milkshake. And I said, I love that you use that to connect the word and to connect those two ideas, but you're only getting one of them. But she, as a 3-year-old, understands the idea of connecting two ideas because we've been working on that. And that came from this.
I love it. That's perfect. So I will add that other link to the end of these slides so that they're still nice and neatly where you can get to them from Personalized Pathways. So a link for kernel sentences and expansions, if that's an activity you would like to teach. I think it's really fun. It's really easy and really fun to get students writing. Okay, so now let's take a look at Narrate specifically, and we're going to look at some of the unique features that are specific to Narrate. Again, these slides might get kind of small for you to see, especially if you're on a small screen. And if that's the case, then just know that you can come back to pages 222 to 224. Those are the print pages in your standards framework notebook that we gave everybody. And so you can come back and take a look at it. So Narrate really is about representing experiences. And how do we represent experiences? Like usually through stories, usually through histories. So this is about the way students use language to represent those experiences, whether they're real or imaginary. I do think that Narrate is one of the easier key language uses for us to understand, because I think it's one that we all use quite a lot in teaching. Like, what's your story? Connect to a story. Tell me a story about this thing. I think we kind of do this a lot. So what you're looking at on the screen now is some breakdowns of the genre Narrate to get more specific, like personal, recount, the purpose, and sample classroom applications, like how I came here, how I got to this country, or you won't believe what happened. Let me tell you something from yesterday. Yes, so we're about 2 pages off. Rebecca and Megan, you're making good points here. So the print page is 224. The PDF page is 222 on the PDF thing, because it's not counting the front matter. And that's why there's a difference in those pages. Okay, so as you take a look here at the sample genres, the purpose, and the sample classroom applications, how can we be mindful of some of the different backgrounds and approaches our students may have to aspects of narrative? And when we think about it from various cultural lenses. I'm going to add this question to the chat so you can see it and think about it. Yes, Sarah wrote that just to me, but she means it for everybody, with choices. So if we can give students choices in maybe which text they're choosing, or how they're going to write a text. I know that if I'm asking a question like here at the very beginning, how I came to this country, I want to be very careful to recognize that not every English learner came to this country. Very many of them were born right here in our community. So I want to make sure that there are all kinds of ways to answer that kind of question. How any move I ever had to make, or the moving from elementary to middle school, for example. So how can I make that a little more open? Yes, there are various traditions for storytelling, Holly. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm getting at. And even different traditions about how we discuss truth. So truth versus fiction and telling stories. Different approaches to identity, understanding oneself. Yes, the ways that we go about telling stories. I remember not long after I had seen a graduate paper presented on different narrative styles or reasoning styles, and I saw like the one that was written like in a circle. I was reading one of my students' papers and I realized that she had worked her way into a point in a way that I was not used to seeing. And so that was very interesting to pay attention to that. Yes, Maria, what's your experience? And kind of open up to there are all kinds of different experiences. So our lives don't have to be the same. Our stories don't have to come out the same. And in fact, that's the beauty of narrative, is that we really get to see a lot more. I'm going to be quiet for a minute in case anybody wants to unmute and add into that conversation.
I think we have to also remember some of these kids, they're actually learning their Spanish back. Mm-hmm. The ones that are born here, like the ones who are in heritage, they're learning to read and look and write stories in their Spanish language, and their English is almost better in the reading and the writing now. So it's, yes, depending who your students are. So
yes, agreed. Okay, so moving on, let's pay attention to how a narrate can change and how it does expand as we go through the years of schooling. So from early elementary to, and I find this interesting because it's not elementary, middle, and high, folks. This is early elementary, so like maybe K2 or 3, upper elementary like 4 or 5 through middle, but then middle overlaps here again to high. So when we take a look at this, you might be across 2 or 3 of these boxes. So we're seeing that narrate across the years always expects students to express ideas, interact with others, and create these multimodal texts. But the resources and the sophistication builds. And what that means is that we have to pay attention to those learners who come to us after those early years of narrate have been taught in our schooling system. So how can we help newcomers who arrive after early elementary to build up their own resources for narrate? Full translanguaging, use your full linguistic repertoire is what Holly's saying, write in their first language and then bring it back in. Move it over to English as much as they can. Anybody else? Yes, drawings and representing are definitely a part of WIDA's language modalities now. So we are not shying away from language when we allow representations, visuals, I would say full body expressions. TPR is old school. I just got to see a teacher using TPR in a classroom, and it wasn't an ESL teacher, and it was really amazing. Yes, giving lots of scaffolding so that the stories can be built maybe collaboratively or in chunks with pieces that are provided and they're put in order, any of that. Yes, comic strips. Thank you, Megan. I'm a big fan of those can-dos. Okay. One more slide here with Narrate, and we're looking across the content areas. And I find it really interesting because we don't always think of Narrate in math, but quite simply, math stories are narrate. They're not full stories with characters and conflicts and resolutions, but they do give us like a sense of context for why we would have to do that kind of math. And I'll always point out, because I love it so much, if you have never seen a real math story, take a look at Circumference and the Knights of the Round Table, or yes, Carlos Counts Kittens. I mean, there are math stories, and it's really fun to take a look at that. So Narrate is going to work across all of these content areas. It's going to interact, and we're going to be able to see Narrate, even if it's not highlighted or the most predominant key language use in every core area, it's still going to be represented there. So again, I think of Narrate as an easy place for us to start, because, you know, we're in this new framework. And so let's start ourselves off with success, and Narrate gives us that success. We're not, you know, hurting our brains too hard to think, how are we going to teach our students to narrate? So hopefully we really are all able to feel successful about that. So when you think about Narrate across the content areas, what surprises you about Narrate in these different content areas? And what difficulties or assets does Narrate present to teachers who are trying to support the integration of content and language? Maybe not and, or pick a question to respond to. Is anybody surprised by Narrate across the content areas? We know this, all right? What do you think about your content area teachers or your your classroom teachers who teach these content areas? Are they going to be surprised to find that they can use Narrate, something that's relatively easy for our students to do and feel successful at, to teach math or science?
I think coming from like secondary, and I've been going into all of the PLTs to introduce the can-dos, or really like go dive into them so that they're looking at them and not just putting them up on the shelf. But like, especially the science and math, there's a lot of kickback because they're like, they have to go so fast with their standards that to slow down or to even differentiate a lot more than what they are doing seems to just be the worst thing that I've ever asked them to do. And it's kind of like, this all looks great, and I know that it can be done, but trying to get it to line up with what they're teaching, it just seems to be like the roadblock.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think it is. I feel like what I'm seeing is teachers saying that this is hard to do in addition to what I'm already doing. And what I want us to get to, what I hope we can get to as ESL teachers, is that this is so internalized that it's never in addition, it's internalized. Right. And eventually what that means, and I think this is a very long-term goal, like next year we can start supporting our content teachers on this, and the year after that, maybe we'll start seeing some movement. So I really am like making my goals for this long-term, I don't expect us to see this big movement today, okay? So keep that in mind. But what I'm hoping is that we can see, hey, look, you're a teacher teaching these kids. So you can keep doing what you're doing, which is exclusive design. And then you're still going to have to do something separate for these kids, or you're not teaching them. Or I can tell you a new way to do inclusive design that wraps these kids into the original planning you're doing. This is still tier 1 instruction. It's inclusive. Everybody's welcome, tier 1 instruction. And when we can present it that way, I think we can get movement. The problem is, a limitation is, it's hard for us still to see it as not separate. It's hard for us, us, ESL teachers on this call, to see it as not separate. So that is why my goal, if you go back to our objectives, is that we become so familiar with it that it's really internalized in us. That's what this year is all about to me, is that it's so internalized in us that we can start saying to our colleagues, what I think I'm saying to you is, no, it's just right there. It's just, it's already in front of you. Here's your way in, and here's the student's way in. And now we're designing and delivering from the beginning with these kids in mind, which means we're designing and delivering for every kid and not separating and saying, I have to do my lesson plan and something extra. That's the goal. Feel free to tell me where I'm really short-sighted or I'm missing like the actual roadblocks. That's the goal. I feel like it's a 3-year goal. What do you think? Okay, well, I appreciate the curious nods. So we'll see how it's going to go. Nods. And I don't blame you for the for the hesitation in all of that. But let's do our part, and if we just take it one step at a time. So the next question I would really have, go ahead. Somebody was going to say something.
I'm sorry. I started to type it, but I'm typing too slow and making too many mistakes. So I'm just going to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
It would be really helpful to be able to have scores earlier, of course, but the time and the muscle that it takes to get the can-dos ready. Oh my gosh. It's like asking for the data manager's firstborn to get a roster so that we can get all of the kids in all the classes. So we just got a roster maybe a week and a half ago. So to be able to get the can-dos done, we'll be lucky to have them done by maybe the second week of October. Mm-hmm. And by then we're done with first quarter and they're like, don't interrupt me. I'm on a roll. I got to keep going. So we're always $1 short and a day late and all that. And it just seems like they look at us like, you've got to be crazy, right? To come in late to the game when we don't have a choice.
Right. We don't. And so here's my solution to that, which is still only perhaps a partial solution. So I'm not suggesting that I'm not suggesting anything I say is a panacea for all. But here's one thing that I think can help with this. I'm not convinced that ESL teachers doing can-dos and giving them to teachers is meeting the goal, which is then teachers using can-dos for instruction. And so the can-dos and not yet's presentation that's listed under professional development, it's at the very bottom, go to Shell PDs and it takes you to the next page. Can-dos and not yet's is a presentation that is there for you to force a copy, make your own, and present it to your school. When you present it, you're telling teachers how to map their students onto can-dos, and it's a workshop. And now you have leadership credit for doing a workshop. You're not doing the can-dos just for teachers to put it away. You're leading a workshop where teachers together are building their can-dos. They can work on grade level teams, or they can do it individually and just get help from each other, however works at your level. And so now, because the teachers are mapping it out, they're getting more familiar with what the can-dos actually say. And you can extend it with a follow-up workshop on now let's apply it to our lessons. Megan, you said that's what you did. How did it go?
So it was actually pretty well received. So I went into all the ELA, and I know it's different. This is secondary, but I went into the ELA PLTs and I used your presentation. I kind of made it fit our school. And I had all of the scores by grade level. And then I always do I have a spreadsheet. Christine Cullenkamp started it, but then now I make it my own. And I have like their homeroom teacher. So then they know which team. So they went through, I had highlighters for them. They highlighted all of their students. And then after part of the presentation, I mean, you have it all laid out. After, when it got to that point, it was like, all right, let's look at it. Let's try to put our kids in. And I had a paper copy for them so they could write on it. And then they also were able to get the digital copy so they could add it. And then I had them share it back to me. And then I created like a master 6th grade, master 7th grade, master 8th grade for the Encore teachers. And then after they were done, I started going into the other PLTs. So I have math left, but going through and doing like an abbreviated like meeting with them, talking about it, giving them suggestions on how to use the can-dos, how to modify and adapt their lessons. It was well received by some, and some others there was a lot of kickback, like, you expect me to do what? And it's like, this isn't brand new. But I think it was it was eye-opening for some, and I have a lot more teachers coming to me asking for different types of pointers on how to modify certain assignments, and I love that. So it was great. And they had to look at the scores, and it got them looking at it and seeing where their kids are. And instead of saying, my kids can't do this, like, yes, they can't yet, but let's look at what they can do. Because I was really tired of the same teachers coming to me about the same
You
kids.
speak zero
Like,
English.
yes, like,
Zero's not on our scale.
okay, so they cannot do an essay. So let's figure out what they can do instead of, they can't do the 5-paragraph essay, but let's see, maybe they could do a Flipgrid or, something like that. So it was great. And I highly recommend it because it really got me looking at those key language uses too, because that's all a part of it. And it made me become more of like an expert in that now, since I had to be prepared to present that to my colleagues. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that example. Look, if that is something you want to do, I'm here to help. Hernan, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to share that I presented the can-dos during PLTs as well, and I shared modifications that they can use with the students in the classrooms, because some teachers, like exactly what you said, we prepare this document, we share with them, but then the document just end up somewhere because they do not really see it as I would say as a tool. They just say, okay, this is the information, such and such student only can do this. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But then if I say, okay, the student is able to do this, so this is what you can do. You can create, you can partner this child with another kid so that they can read together. You can do choral reading. You can do graphic organizers. If I give them options, then it's more useful and they appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you, for sharing your experiences with that. So there's a lot of support for that. I've got at least one video. I think I had 2 and 1 timed out, and I didn't realize I didn't save it right. But anyway, there's at least one video there that you can watch, but I can work with you. I can coach you so that you feel good about doing that presentation. I can come co-deliver it with you, maybe, depending on the schedule and the time, but I would definitely try. So keep thinking about that and let me know. I definitely think that if you're going to put that work into it, it needs to mean something to educators. So with that, let's move on to our sleuth groups. I do want to make sure I save some time for you to talk. This conversation is great. Let's make sure you get into your small groups. So this year they're called sleuth groups because I think I'm funny, so you should laugh now. And we are still language detectives. We are still looking for clues, and that's why we have sleuth groups. Thank you, Hernan. I appreciate it. So I want to remind you, our 4 big ideas are kind of how we divided it. And then I don't think you are going to be able to see this very clearly, but I just want you to know I have got everybody kind of in groups, but I do want to say thank you to Catherine Park, Megan Callahan, Abadesa Ochoa, Erica Hunt, Hernan Figueroa, Paula McCabe, who's not here today, but we've got Catherine taking over for her, Stephanie Turner, Michael Herman, and Stacy Jolly, Elizabeth Stevens, and Maureen Fisher. So thank you. Big applause to all of you who are agreeing to help facilitate these conversations. What that means is if I don't get to hear your vent where you're saying like you need help, somebody is, and they're going to be able to make sure I know that somebody needs help. So keep, making sure that we can be here to help one another. Don't forget that the conversation really can be a lot of anything, but I do hope that today you'll take some time to get to know one another. So share how to get in touch with each other because you are a little group. Maybe you want to form a Slack group or a group chat. Maybe you want to just have an email thread where you can share ideas back and forth. Maybe you want to build a folder where you can throw ideas and lessons back and forth. Now, our groups are multi-level. I don't have enough secondary teachers to make sure we have all these separate groups, and we're a K-12 certification. And so I find that that's a compelling enough reason for us to do mixed level groups. And there's always something for me as a secondary teacher to learn from you as an elementary teacher. And I hope that's true vice versa. So also think about sharing new learning and insights. The books have been ordered, so thank you to Sherry Fisher for ordering the books that you asked for Personalized Pathways, and I'll get them out to you as soon as they get in, or Sherry will help get them out to you, because Sherry's amazing. So thank you, Sherry. And so whatever new learning that you've already done this year, you can share that as you can, connect it back to what we know from WIDA about Narrate or about your focus group, and then take some time to start establishing goals and how this works towards your PDP. So that's what we're doing. Are there any questions when we get into groups? Oops, that's it. Okay, let's get into groups. Let me stop sharing and move you in. Okay, if there are questions, ask now. I see that you guys are sharing in resources. I'll come back around to them. Okay, it looks like everybody should be in the group that they're supposed to go to. But when I send you out to breakout rooms, those of you who are signed in not through your school email, it'll take me a minute to get you back in to the right group. So just hang out and we'll do that. So, right, so welcome back, everybody. I think the rooms are now all finally closed. So thank you for coming back. I hope you had a great conversation. So feel free to add to the chat any notes that you have on what you got to talk about. I hope you got to meet your group. Let me know whether this is still even working for you. You can send that privately so that your members don't know that you don't want to continue with them or whatever. But I'm very interested in your thoughts about all of this, your new learning, your insights. Yeah, there's a lot going on. Michael, I don't think you're wrong. I don't think the idea of collaborating outside of this time with this group, I don't think it's hard to say that that's a stretch. It is a stretch to ask you to do much outside with this group, and that's fine. If all you do is get to come back in next quarter to the same group, hopefully that gets to continue, right? Go ahead, Michael.
No, I meant there's a lot of change at people's schools. So at people's schools, the staff changes and new people coming in and new types of ESL service, which affects their ability to collaborate with teachers at their schools.
Yes, okay.
Because all these new schedules and that we're trying to work out, which I think really has makes it difficult to process how to do this sometimes.
It does. I mean, we are, so many of us, I think we wanted things this year to just look more feasible, and I don't think they necessarily do look more feasible than last year. They just look differently difficult. It's not the same difficulties, but it's new difficulties the second year in a row. It's it's exhausting. So I'm glad that you are loving your group. Okay, let me give you a few things. I'm going to kind of give you everything out all at once. So take some time to parse this out. I want to make sure we have time to get through this all. So the first link that you have is, again, the playlist report. You don't need to do that right now. You just need to do that before the end of the quarter. If and only if you're doing extra stuff on the outside and you want more CEUs than just this hour and a half of credit, right? So this hour and a half is 0.15 CEUs. If you're doing more and you need more, that's the form to tell me about it. I've also done a SEL form. Rebecca and I were talking today, and I was like, you know what we need is we need another check-in Google form, because I feel like I haven't heard from some of you, and I hate that. I want to know what you need. I want to make sure my time is in service for your needs. So if you do have a minute to spare, it's a very quick form. No questions are required, and I'm not taking your name. So it just is a chance to vent. Let me know what's working, what's not working, and what you need. So what can I do for you? That's my big question. If my energies are not helping you, I need to redirect my energies. So That's what that
All
form is all
right.
about. It is 4:59. Thank you so much for letting us solve some of these riddles together, thinking about them together. You know, you can get in touch with me. So please do, especially new teachers, you know, but anybody, if you want me to come visit you, send out, especially a Monday, Wednesdays in between the open doors, and Fridays, I have a little bit more flexibility to come see you.
Get like using that as part of our pathway.
Mhm.
If
Okay.
people don't have time to do other things because we have homework and coursework we have to complete,
Yes.
could we use that in lieu of something else or in addition to something else?
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about that as far as I know and what I still need to discover. So as far as I know, you're getting CEUs already for letters. And if that's the case, then you don't need my CEUs. So like you wouldn't double dip, right? You wouldn't get CEUs for letters and for me. It just means if you're doing that, then you don't, right, then you don't need to do anything extra for me. Yes. So for the conversations,
That's what we
yes,
meant. Yeah.
that can suffice. Absolutely. So that's, yes,
Yeah.
there's,
Not extra credit, just like if that's what our text is instead of a book or a podcast or something, because we already have to read it.
yes.
Or
And
do it.
I am going to keep pushing us back into our framework, right? So our new expanded standards. So you'll get that from me, but you're going to get that from me with a huge amount of understanding that you don't have time to read 400 pages. And that's why I'm the one reading it.
Yay. I think that answers that question satisfactorily. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Sure. Let me record it. Okay, go ahead.
If I created a module in Canvas as part of my lesson plan to go with Narrate, how would I share that on the Google playlist?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you just created it for you and you just want it for asset creation, you could take a screenshot and add it, or just like, you could actually, I think there's a place to just share the link. And so you could share your link to that, as long as
would you have to be added to my Canvas page to have access to that link?
I don't think so, because I think I'm district level enough that I can see it anyway.
Okay.
So I don't think so. Now, if you want that module to be shareable to other ESL teachers, that would be distribution. And so then we'll talk about how to make sure you add it to the Commons. And Rebecca probably knows more about that than me. So we'll make sure you get it to the Commons and get it somewhere that we can list it. Yeah. So if that's where you want to go, and you want to go from asset creation to asset distribution, let me know.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather.